Look at your bank statement. I mean, really look at it. It looks so precise, right? Black and white.
Yeah, a neat little column of numbers.
Exactly. When you log into your app, you see exactly what came in, exactly what went out, and you get this, I don't know, this illusion of absolute control. The math is just clean. You're either in the red or you're in the black.
It is incredibly comforting. We have this deep psychological craving to neatly categorize our lives into spreadsheets. I mean, it gives us a false sense of mastery over our environment.
Right, but then the moment you tap your card for like $6 coffee because your boss yelled at you, or what I can't use dot dot dot.
Yeah.
The moment you tap your card for a coffee, or you buy a new phone at midnight because you're bored and can't sleep, suddenly that calculator's broken.
It's out the window.
Yeah. The math isn't just math anymore. It's psychology, it's stress, it's impulse. So for today's deep dive, we are looking at a classic manual, Your Money or Your Life, specifically the updated 2018 edition, and it demands that we completely destroy this definition of money. Because money isn't plastic. It isn't a digital zero on a screen, and it isn't just a medium of exchange. The core mission today, for you listening, is to shift you from being a passive victim of your finances to an empowered steward.
Yeah.
Because money is literally your life energy.
And that is the pivotal shift right there. Most people, they operate on a treadmill. It's this endless, exhausting loop where the singular operating principle is just more is better.
Right.
And the fascinating part is that this holds true regardless of your income bracket. I mean, we have data showing that whether someone makes $30,000 a year or $300,000 a year, their internal narrative is identically flawed.
Which is wild. They both think they don't have enough.
Exactly. They consistently believe that having exactly 50% more than what they currently have will finally bring them happiness and security. So today, we are going to outline a very specific analytical framework to step off that treadmill.
You should clarify, we aren't going to talk about envelope systems or, clipping coupons.
No, definitely not. We are going to restructure how you perceive your time, your paycheck, and your very existence in the material world.
Let's start right there with this idea of life energy, because this fundamentally redefines the core metric of our entire adult lives.
Yeah.
If you look at the raw biological numbers, a human being has approximately 650,000 hours of life.
Assuming a totally average, healthy lifespan, yeah.
Right. Now, if you are 40 years old right now, sitting in your car or at your desk listening to this, you might only have about 350,000 hours left in the bank.
And we have to deduct from that balance immediately, because you are going to spend roughly half of those remaining hours just maintaining your physical body.
Sleep.
Sleep, eating, showering, recovering from illness. So you are left with maybe 175,000 hours of actual discretionary consciousness.
Wow.
That remaining time is your ultimate non-renewable treasure. You can always make another dollar. You cannot manufacture another hour.
So when you view your life through the lens of those strictly finite hours, the whole game changes. Money is simply something you trade your precious life energy for. It's a direct one-to-one exchange.
Precisely.
You sell hours of your heartbeat, which you can never ever get back, for pieces of paper. And once you internalize that, it sets the stage for the first truly actionable thing we have to do here, which is calculating your real hourly wage.
And we don't mean the one on your employment contract.
Right, the real one.
Because the contract wage is a profound fiction. Let's walk through the mechanics of this, because people tend to look at their gross salary and divide it by a standard 40-hour work week. They think, great, I make $25 an hour.
Sounds reasonable.
But that ignores the massive hidden infrastructure of time and capital required strictly to maintain that employment.
Okay, let's use a hyper-specific example, because the math here is, well, it's terrifying in the best way. Say you make $50,000 a year. That's roughly $1,000 a week. 40 hours.
Yeah.
$25 an hour. But think about your daily commute. If you spend 45 minutes each way sitting in gridlock traffic, gripping the steering wheel, that is 7.5 hours a week dedicated to your job that you are not being compensated for.
You weren't doing that for fun.
No. It is life energy expended strictly because of your employment.
And the monetary drain of that commute is equally significant. I mean, you are burning gas, paying tolls, wearing down your tires, depreciating your vehicle's value.
Oh, totally.
But it goes far beyond transportation. Look at your wardrobe. You are purchasing professional clothing suits, specific shoes, dry cleaning services that you would never willingly wear on a Saturday afternoon. That is money spent to sustain the job.
Oh, and don't forget the psychological tax, the decompression spending.
Yes, the decompression spending is huge.
Let's talk about the Friday night I survived the week $80 sushi order. Or the fact that you are so completely drained when you get home at 6:30, you spend $30 on DoorDash instead of cooking the groceries rotting in your fridge.
Exactly. Or the 2-week all-inclusive vacation you book just to recover from the burnout of the other 50 weeks of the year.
Yeah, the calculation requires brutal honesty. You have to ask yourself, if I did not need this specific money-earning job, what time expenditures and monetary expenses would completely disappear from my life?
You subtract the job-related monetary expenses, the gas, the clothes, the takeout, the extra coffee to stay awake from your weekly net income, and you add the job-related hours, the commute, the time spent decompressing, and the time spent answering emails on Sunday night to your weekly hours worked.
So the math totally flips. Your weekly take-home pay isn't $1,000. After taxes, maybe it's $750. Then you subtract the commuting costs, the work clothes, the convenience meals. Maybe you are only clearing $500 of actual keepable wealth.
Which is a huge drop.
And your hours worked isn't 40. When you add the commute, the decompression, the preparation, you're dedicating 60 hours a week to the existence of that job. Suddenly, you divide that $500 by 60 hours, and your glorious $25 an hour wage is actually $8.30 an hour.
And that realization, it's the necessary shock to the system. It reframes every single transaction in your life because you aren't spending money anymore. You are spending those specific calculated hours.
Right. Which brings us to a concept from the book that completely changed how I look at my house. The Gazingas pin.
The Gazingas pin. It's a brilliant term for the unconscious impulse buy. It's the item you automatically grab without thinking because it triggers a tiny dopamine hit.
We all have one.
Oh, absolutely. For some people, it's stationary. For others, it's a new kitchen gadget, a decorative throw pillow, or, a coffee mug with a funny saying.
Okay, let's use a really specific example. Let's say my Gazingas pin is ultralight camping gear. I have this fantasy of being an outdoorsman, so I'm constantly browsing online, and I find this new titanium camping stove for $50.
Okay.
Now, the old me looks at my bank account, sees $2,000 in there, and thinks, $50, no problem, I can afford that. But the new me, armed with my real hourly wage of $8.30, has to do a different calculation.
Because it's not $50 anymore.
Exactly. That tiny piece of metal didn't cost $50. It literally cost 6 entire hours of my actual lifespan. I have to trade almost an entire day of dealing with my boss, sitting in traffic, and coming home exhausted just to put a stove in my closet that I might use twice a year.
And when you translate currency back into life energy like that, the psychological friction of a purchase skyrockets. It forces a critical pause. You have to ask, is this titanium stove worth 360 minutes of my finite existence?
Right. Is it worth the stress of my commute?
Exactly. And once you see the true cost, the answer is remarkably often no.
Which naturally leads to the big question, I think.
Yeah.
If we logically know this, if we know we are trading our actual heartbeats for this stuff, why do we keep doing it? Why do we have garages full of boxes we haven't opened in 3 years?
Well, we do it because our internal yardstick for satisfaction has been hijacked. I mean, we live in an environment, a consumer culture that has spent billions of dollars perfectly calibrating a single message, which is more equals better.
Yeah.
To understand why we fall for it, we have to look at a concept called the fulfillment curve.
Okay, so picture a graph in your head. On the bottom horizontal axis, you have money spent, going from 0 to $1 million. On the vertical axis going up, you have fulfillment or happiness received.
And at the very beginning of the curve, when you have absolutely nothing, spending money buys basic survival. It buys a roof, clean water, rice, and beans.
The essentials.
Yes. And the fulfillment you get from that first bit of money is astronomical. The curve shoots almost straight up. It feels incredible not to be freezing or starving.
Absolutely. And then, once you have basic survival locked down, you start spending a little more money, and you enter the zone of comforts. You upgrade the rice and beans to a nice roast chicken. You get a softer mattress.
A reliable used car.
Yeah. So you don't have to wait for the bus in the rain. Fulfillment is still climbing nicely. You feel great. Then you spend even more and cross into luxuries. You take a flight to Europe instead of driving to the next state over. You buy a really high-end smartphone. You eat at a Michelin star restaurant.
And the line is still going up.
It is, but it's starting to flatten out a bit, right?
Yes. But here is the critical, counterintuitive insight that the more is better culture violently suppresses. There is a peak to this curve. It does not go up forever. beyond a very specific point. Acquiring more stuff actually decreases your fulfillment. The line starts to curve downward.
See, this is the exact opposite of what we are taught. How does more stuff make you less happy?
Because eventually, the things you buy become burdens. They demand maintenance, they require expensive insurance, they need to be cleaned, protected, and stored. They take up physical space in your home and mental space in your brain.
It makes me think of my uncle, who bought a boat. He spent years dreaming of this boat. He finally gets the promotion, buys a massive speedboat, and for the first 3 weeks, his fulfillment was off the charts.
The peak of the curve.
Exactly. But then, the docking fees were a fortune. It needed winterizing. The engine had a weird rattle that cost $3,000 to diagnose. He spent every weekend either fixing the boat, cleaning the boat, or stressing about whether a storm was going to damage the boat.
It owned him.
The boat completely owned him. He traded thousands of hours of his life energy to become a janitor for a piece of fiberglass. That is the downward slope of the curve.
Exactly. He crossed over the peak. And that peak, the highest possible point of fulfillment before it starts to drop into burden and clutter, is a magical coordinate called enough.
Enough.
Enough is having everything you need for survival, everything for deep comfort, and even a curated selection of true luxuries, but with absolutely zero excess to drag you down.
But the human brain is so bad at recognizing enough. I mean, the book brings up this fascinating study by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. The specific numbers are older now. He pegged it around $75,000 a year in the U.S. a while back, but the principle remains rock solid.
The data is incredibly revealing.
Yeah. It showed that past a certain threshold of financial sufficiency, more money mathematically did not correlate to more day-to-day happiness. Yet, in live seminars conducted in the 80s and 90s, when they asked people across all income brackets how much money they would need to be truly happy, the answer was always a glitch in the human operating system.
Yes. The person making minimum wage said they needed 50% more, but the executive making $200,000 a year also said they needed 50% more to finally be at peace.
It's crazy.
We suffer from a structural blindness to enough. We mistakenly believe that enough means deprivation. We think it means living on bare minimums and denying ourselves pleasure.
Like eating gruel.
Right. But if we map it back to the fulfillment curve, enough is the precise opposite of deprivation. It is the absolute pinnacle of optimization. It is identifying the exact beautiful point where your expended life energy yields the absolute highest return on joy, and refusing to spend a single heartbeat past that point.
So the obvious question for you listening is, how do you find it? How do I find my personal peak of enough? Because my peak might involve a really expensive mountain bike, while your peak might involve funding a massive garden.
Exactly. It's highly personal.
The only way to find your specific coordinate is to strip away all the cultural expectations, silence the advertising, and look at the cold, hard, unfeeling data of your own life. And that requires a level of accountability most people are terrified of.
It does. Finding enough requires extreme accountability regarding the flow of your life energy. This moves us from philosophy into the highly actionable framework of the program. The first step is what the authors call making peace with the past.
And this step is a gut punch. I'm just going to warn you. It involves 2 calculations. First, you have to calculate your lifetime earnings. That means you literally figure out every single penny that has ever entered your life since your very first job.
And people often resist this. They ask how they could possibly find out what they made delivering newspapers at age 14. But the effort is part of the required psychological shift.
You really have to dig.
You do. You go to the Social Security website and pull your earnings history. You dig through dusty filing cabinets for old W-2s. You estimate the cash jobs you worked in college. You bring the totality of your labor into the light.
Right. And then comes the second calculation, your current net worth. You tally up the realistic liquid value of everything you own, your cash, the equity in your home, the blue book value of your car. Then you subtract all your liabilities, the mortgage, the remaining student loans, the credit card balances.
When you place these two numbers side by side, it is often a jarring, emotionally overwhelming experience. A person might realize that $1.2 million has passed through their hands over the last 20 years, yet their current net worth is negative $5,000.
Ouch.
The realization of how much life energy has leaked through their fingers can trigger intense regret.
And that's exactly why the core mantra of this entire process has to be introduced right here. No shame, no blame.
It is essential. The net worth number you arrive at is not your self-worth. It is not an indictment of your character. It is simply ground zero.
A starting line.
Exactly. It's a GPS coordinate on a map. If you carry guilt, you will avoid looking at the numbers, and avoidance is the enemy of financial independence. You have to actively forgive yourself for past mistakes to achieve pure, objective financial intelligence.
No shame, no blame. I love that. Because you can't navigate if you don't know where you're starting. Once you clear that emotional hurdle, you move into the daily mechanics, which is tracking and tabulating.
Step 2.
Now, I'm going to play the skeptic here, because when I first read this part of the manual, I honestly balked. Tracking every single cent that comes in and goes out, down to the penny. Every pack of gum, every parking meter, every random app subscription.
It sounds overwhelming.
It sounds utterly exhausting. It sounds neurotic. Isn't this just a financial crash diet?
It's the most common objection, absolutely. But it stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of what this tracking actually is. This is not a budget. I cannot emphasize that enough.
Wait, really? It's not a budget?
Not at all. Budgets are external, rigid, and almost universally guilt-inducing. A budget is exactly like a dietary crash diet. You impose an arbitrary external rule on yourself. I will only eat 500 calories, or I will only spend $50 on groceries this week. And because it's disconnected from your actual desires, you inevitably fail, binge, and feel terrible about yourself.
So if a budget is a crash diet, what is tracking?
Tracking is mindful eating. You aren't restricting yourself at all. If you want to buy a coffee, buy the coffee. But you must write it down. You are simply building an internal muscle of supreme awareness. You are watching where your life energy flows without judging it in the moment.
Okay, let's get into the weeds on this mindful observation, because the manual specifically warns against using standard off-the-shelf budgeting software categories, right? You don't just dump everything into a bucket called miscellaneous.
No, you have to create categories that reflect your actual unique life.
Exactly, because standard categories hide your true behavioral patterns.
Right. If you use a broad category called health, you learn nothing. But a mindful tracker will split that up. They might create a category called true health care, which includes gym memberships, fresh vegetables, and vitamins. And they might create a separate category called access to the medical system, which includes insurance premiums, copays, and pharmaceuticals.
Or food. Instead of just food, you break it down into basic groceries, dining out with friends, and desperation takeout because I'm exhausted. Once you track every cent for a month, you group all of this into a monthly tabulation.
And here is the mechanism that ties the whole system together. You don't just tally up the total dollars spent in each custom category. You translate those dollars back into hours of life energy using that brutal, real hourly wage we calculated earlier.
Yes. This is the magic trick.
Uh-huh.
So you look at that desperation takeout category. You didn't just spend $400 this month on it. If your real hourly wage is $8.30, you take out your calculator and you realize you spent 48 hours of your life energy.
A full week of work.
You worked an entire grueling week at your job strictly to fund the food you ate because the job made you too tired to cook.
It's a devastatingly clear mirror, but we have to acknowledge an important reality here. Tracking the data is merely observation. It's collecting the raw material. Raw data alone rarely changes deep-seated human behavior. The real transformation happens when we process that data through a very specific psychological filter.
The transformation engine. This is where the whole philosophy clicked for me. Once you see exactly where your life energy is flowing every month, you don't whip yourself into submission. You use 3 specific questions to organically recalibrate your desires.
Yes.
You don't force yourself to stop spending. You literally stop wanting to spend.
Every month at the bottom of your tabulation, you look at each spending category, let's say that desperation takeout category or your clothing category, and you ask yourself 3 questions. Question 1, did I receive fulfillment, satisfaction, and value in proportion to the life energy spent? You mark the category with a plus sign for yes, a minus sign for no, or a 0 for neutral.
Proportion is the key word there. Did those cold French fries bring me 48 hours worth of joy?
Exactly. Then, question 2, is this expenditure of life energy in alignment with my values and life purpose? Again, evaluate and mark it with a plus, minus, or 0. And finally, question 3, how might this expenditure change if I didn't have to work for money?
This replaces the external yardstick of society with an internal yardstick. Let's go back to my titanium camping stove example, my Gazingas pin. It sits in a category called outdoor gear. I look at the total life energy spent on gear that month. Did I get value proportional to the hours of my life I traded for it? No, it's sitting in a closet.
Yeah.
Minus sign.
Right?
Is buying gear I don't use aligned with my core life purpose? No, I value connection and experiences, not accumulating metal objects. Minus sign. How would this change if I didn't have to work? Well, if I didn't have to work, I'd have the time to actually go camping, so I'd probably use the gear I already own instead of impulse buying new stuff to simulate the feeling of camping.
And here is the counterintuitive insight that makes this the most powerful tool in the framework. By simply assigning that minus sign to unfulfilling expenses, you hack a very deep, very old part of your brain's survival mechanism.
How so?
Well, we are biologically wired to move toward pleasure and away from pain. When you consciously link a purchase to a drain on your vital life energy and you explicitly label it as failing to provide fulfillment, you naturally stop desiring it.
It's not deprivation. That's what's so wild about this. If I tell you stop buying lattes, you're going to want a latte more than anything in the world because you feel restricted.
Of course.
But if you look at your own spreadsheet and you realize that $150 a month on mediocre drive-through coffee equals 18 hours of your life energy, and you put a big red minus sign next to it, because it doesn't actually make you happy.
Yeah.
You wake up the next day and drive right past the coffee shop. The desire evaporates. You are freeing yourself from things that actively drain you.
It is a profound, almost silent psychological shift. The friction disappears. But human memory is short. To keep this transformation engine running over months and years, we have to externalize it. We have to make it highly visible and aggressively widen the gap between what we earn and what we spend. Internal shifts require constant external reinforcement.
Which brings us to the most visually satisfying part of the process, the wall chart. You literally plot your total monthly income and your total monthly expenses on a massive physical graph, and you hang it up in your house, not hidden in a digital file on your laptop, on the wall.
Physical visibility is crucial. You draw one line for your monthly income and a separate line for your monthly expenses. When you first start this process, those lines might be terrifyingly close together. For many, the expense line might even be above the income line, indicating they are actively going into debt and bleeding life energy.
But as you run those 3 questions every month, and your desires naturally begin to shift away from the clutter and the gazingos pins, that expense line will organically start to trend downward. And you can actively accelerate that drop by practicing what the manual calls creative frugality.
Now, we need to redefine frugality immediately because the word carries a lot of cultural baggage.
It really does.
People hear frugality and they picture misery. They picture reusing tea bags until the water runs clear, eating stale bread, and living a joyless life of extreme penny pinching.
Right, it sounds like punishment. But this framework argues the exact opposite. Frugality isn't deprivation. Frugality is a high-level optimization skill. It is the art of getting the absolute maximum amount of joy out of every single unit of life energy you deploy.
Precisely. It's an expression of self-respect. The book offers highly actionable avenues for this creative frugality. First and foremost, and this is the most lucrative one-stop trying to impress other people,
Oh man, yes.
status signaling is incredibly expensive and yields zero lasting internal fulfillment. If you stop buying cars and clothes to impress neighbors you don't even like, your expenses plummet.
Second, take care of what you have. Maintenance is mathematically always cheaper than replacement. Changing the oil in your car, taking care of your shoes, cleaning your tools.
Yes, and third, do it yourself whenever possible. Learn basic skills.
And fourth, master the art of substitution. This is finding a drastically cheaper or entirely free way to meet the exact same underlying psychological need. Like, if your underlying need is, I want to relax and connect with my friends on a Friday night, the default cultural script says you have to go to a loud restaurant and drop $80 each on dinner and drinks. But substitution says, host a potluck. Have everyone bring a dish. You get the exact same connection, arguably better ambiance, and you spent $10 of life energy instead of $80. You met the need, but optimized the cost.
So that covers driving the expense line down. But to truly widen the gap on that wall chart, we also have to look at the income line. We have to value our life energy by maximizing our income. And to do this effectively, we have to adopt a massive paradigm shift regarding our careers. We must completely sever the conceptual link between work and wages.
Are you saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life? Is garbage advice. Because that is the ultimate cultural dream, the right livelihood. We are told that our jobs should be our passion, our identity, and our primary source of self-actualization.
It is a beautiful sentiment, but in practice, it is often a trap that leads to severe burnout and financial exploitation. Yes, the framework defines work as any activity you do that brings meaning, purpose, and expression to your life. Raising a child is profound work. Tending a community garden is work. Writing poetry is work.
Okay, so what is a job then?
Employment, Paid employment is structurally entirely different. The sole intrinsic guaranteed purpose of paid employment is getting paid. It is a strict economic exchange of your life energy for currency.
I can hear people getting defensive about this. It
Hmm.
sounds a little cynical to say your job is just for the money.
It sounds cynical until you realize how deeply empowering it is. If you expect your employer to provide your meaning, your purpose, your social circle, and your financial security, you are placing an impossible, crushing burden on a corporate entity that ultimately views you as an expense. The authors use a brilliant martial arts concept to explain this: the unbendable arm.
Okay, let's unpack the unbendable arm. How does separating your soul from your paycheck make you stronger?
Well, in Aikido, if you tense your arm muscles to rigidly resist someone pushing against you, your arm becomes brittle and is easily bent. But if you relax your muscles and envision energy flowing outward through your fingertips, your arm becomes incredibly strong and virtually impossible to bend. When your entire identity is rigidly tied to your job title, you are easily bent. If you get passed over for a promotion or if you get laid off, it isn't just a loss of income. It is a terrifying existential crisis. It destroys who you are.
Ah, but if you accept that the job is primarily an energy exchange, you relax. Your identity is secure outside the office. You are unbendable.
Exactly. And from that relaxed, unbendable state, you can objectively and ruthlessly optimize your employment. If the goal of the job is money, then you maximize the money. You negotiate aggressively for raises without fear because you aren't asking for validation of your worth, you are just negotiating a contract.
That makes so much sense.
You can switch industries to maximize your hourly rate. You might even take a high-stress, high-paying job for 3 years specifically to harvest capital, knowing full well it isn't your life's passion, but using it as a tool to buy back your total freedom decades sooner. You maintain your true purpose for your non-earning hours.
That is a total system override. You maximize your income at the employment level strictly to buy back the time to do your true work in the world. So as you implement this, as you maximize your income without ego and creatively minimize your expenses through high-yield frugality, a massive physical gap begins to form on your wall chart, the empty space between the rising income line and the falling expense line. That gap is your capital, your savings. And this is where the philosophy finally meets the hardcore math of freedom.
That gap is everything. The savings aren't just there to sit in a bank account so you can eventually buy a nicer car or remodel a kitchen. That capital is the raw, potent fuel required to generate passive income and ultimately permanently escape the mandatory workforce.
Which brings us to the math of the crossover point. This is where you calculate your monthly investment income. You take your accumulated capital, you multiply it by the current long-term interest rate you expect to earn, and you divide that by 12 months. When you calculate this number, you take a marker and you plot a third line on your wall chart, the passive income line.
And when you first draw it, it will be a tiny blip hovering near the bottom of the chart. Maybe it represents $10 a month in interest. But as your capital gap grows month after month, that investment income line slowly, steadily rises. And simultaneously, because you are continually optimizing your life with the 3 questions, your monthly expense line is holding steady or dropping.
And then, the defining moment of the entire methodology happens. The math simply sets you free.
Eventually, those 2 lines intersect. The moment your passive monthly investment income crosses above your monthly expenses line, you have hit the crossover point. You are officially financially independent. You generate enough life energy from your capital to sustain your physical existence indefinitely. Employment is now strictly 100% optional.
Wait, hold up. I need to push back on the mechanics of this because for someone new to this concept, living off investments indefinitely sounds like literal magic or a scam. How does the money not run out? The original book talked a lot about U.S. Treasury bonds, but interest rates aren't what they were in the 90s. If I'm building this architecture today, how does it actually work?
That's a vital question. The math has evolved, but the underlying physics of wealth remain exactly the same. The modern financial independence community utilizes a framework built on 3 pillars: capital, cushion, and cash.
Let's break those down. The capital is the core engine.
Yes, the capital is the massive income-producing core of your wealth. Today, instead of bonds, the vast majority of the FI community relies on low-cost, broad-market index funds. Vanguard is the classic example.
Okay.
You are essentially buying a tiny slice of the entire global stock market. The emphasis is on radically low-maintenance, set-and-forget strategies.
And this is where the famous 4% rule comes in, popularized by modern FI figures like Mr. Money Mustache. Explain the math to me. If I withdraw 4% of my capital every year to pay my living expenses, won't my account hit zero in 25 years?
It seems like it would, but here is where the math of compounding market returns saves you. Historically, the stock market returns an average of maybe 7 to 10% a year over long timelines. Inflation eats up maybe 2 or 3% of that purchasing power. So the real return, adjusted for inflation, hovers around 5 to 7%.
Uh, so if the pile of money is naturally growing by 5% a year in real purchasing power, and I only siphon off 4% a year to live on, the pile actually never shrinks. It might even slowly grow.
Exactly. The 4% rule is a conservative, safe withdrawal rate based on historical data. If you can save 25 times your annual expenses, you have reached your crossover point. But to protect that capital from short-term market crashes, you need the second pillar.
The cushion. The cushion is cash, right? Not invested.
Correct. It is at least 6 months to a year of basic living expenses sitting as liquid cash in a high-yield savings account. It earns very little, but its job isn't to grow. Its job is to act as a shock absorber.
For emergencies.
Right. If the stock market drops 20% tomorrow, you do not panic. And crucially, you do not sell your capital at a loss to pay for groceries. You live off the cushion until the market recovers.
And the third pillar is the cash.
The cash is the beautiful byproduct of the system. Even after you hit financial independence, most people don't stop working entirely. They just transition to doing their true work, which often generates some incidental income. Plus, your frugal habits are so deeply ingrained that your expenses remain low.
Right. You're not suddenly blowing money on speedboats.
Exactly. The cash is the surplus funds that inevitably build up post-FI, allowing your capital to compound even faster than before.
What I love about charting all this on the wall chart is the psychological effect it has on you years before you actually cross the finish line. Simply seeing those lines converging on your wall changes your posture in the world. You have a visible time horizon. It makes you practically bulletproof at your job. You stop operating out of fear of your boss because you know exactly how many months you have left until you don't need them anymore. You have an escape hatch, and you can see it getting closer.
That visible horizon replaces ambient anxiety with a deep sense of inevitability. But as we reach the culmination of this journey, we have to recognize that true independence isn't just about stockpiling index funds and hitting a math equation. If you only focus on the numbers, you miss the ultimate evolution of the framework. True wealth requires diversifying beyond the monetary system altogether.
This is such a critical pivot. The ultimate goal isn't just financial independence, it's financial interdependence. It's reducing your reliance on cash by building alternative, more resilient forms of wealth. The book lays out what they call the ABCs of natural wealth.
The ABCs are a beautiful way to conceptualize genuine security. A stands for abilities. These are your tangible skills. Your ability to cook a nutritious meal from scratch, your ability to fix a leaking pipe, your knowledge of how to grow vegetables, or your ability to mend clothing.
If I know how to change my own brake pads, I don't need to generate $500 of life energy at my job to pay a mechanic. The skill literally replaces the need for capital.
Exactly. B stands for belonging. These are your deep, authentic relationships, your family, your close friends, your mentors, the people who genuinely have your back when things go wrong, and who you would drop everything to help in return.
And C stands for community. This is your broader network, your neighborhood, local community gardens, tool-sharing libraries, the broader sharing economy.
The original author, Joe Dominguez, had a profound saying: consciousness grows faster than inflation. As you develop these ABCs, as you become more conscious of what actually fulfills you and more skilled at meeting those needs outside the cash economy, your requirement for capital actually shrinks.
That makes total sense.
If you have a network of friends where you trade skills, say you help them navigate their taxes and they help you paint your house, you have bypassed the monetary system entirely. Your resilience increases drastically, while your financial footprint decreases.
But building this kind of natural wealth requires breaking the ultimate social taboo. It requires what the book calls money talks. We have to start having open, honest, no shame, no blame conversations with our friends and family about money, our fears, and our goals.
It is the final barrier. Consumerism thrives in silence and isolation. It pits us against each other in an unwinnable race for status symbols. We hide our debt, we fake our wealth, and we suffer alone.
Imagine changing the script. Think about the next time you're at dinner with your friends. Instead of just complaining about how terrible your boss is, or subtly comparing the cars you drive, or talking about the latest streaming show, Imagine having the courage to ask the table, if you didn't have to work for a living, what would you actually do with your time? Imagine sharing your real hourly wage calculation with a friend.
Those conversations are radically transformative. They rebuild the village mindset. They foster shared learning, deep connection, and a collective realization that the more is better narrative is failing all of us. When you realize your friends are also exhausted by the treadmill, it gives you all permission to step off together.
Okay, let's pull all of these threads together. We have covered an incredible amount of ground today. We took the conventional idea of money and completely shattered it, redefining it not as paper or plastic, but as your strictly finite life energy.
Yes.
We did the painful math to calculate our real hourly wage, forcing ourselves to confront the hidden costs and the stolen time of our employment.
We examined the fulfillment curve, acknowledging that beyond a point of comfort, more stuff actually burdens us, and we learned how to identify our own personal peak of enough.
We implemented extreme accountability. We calculated our lifetime earnings without shame, and we started tracking every cent mindfully, like a food journal, not a diet. We deployed the transformation engine, those three questions, to organically hack our desires so we stop wanting things that drain our life energy.
We made the abstract tangible with the wall chart. We optimized our existence through creative frugality, and we severed our identity from our jobs, maximizing our income from a place of unbendable strength.
We mapped the math of the crossover point, understanding how capital, cushion, and cash combine with market returns to buy back our freedom. And finally, we looked beyond the spreadsheet to build natural, unshakable wealth through abilities, belonging, and community.
It is a comprehensive, profound system. It moves you from a state of unawareness to strict accountability, and finally to true, enduring autonomy. To you, sitting there right now, listening to this, you have the blueprint. The math is real. The wall chart is waiting for you to draw that very first terrifying, liberating line. You don't have to keep trading your heartbeats for clutter. You are no longer just making a dying. You are designing a life.
The tools are entirely in your hands. The only remaining variable is whether you are willing to look at the raw numbers honestly and make the conscious choices required to free yourself. And I want to leave you with one final, unmentioned concept to mull over as you go about your day. Think about this. We spend our entire adult lives desperately trying to build a massive fortress of money to protect ourselves from the world. We sacrifice our time, our health, and our relationships to accumulate more and more, convinced that if the pile is just big enough, we will finally be safe. But what if the ultimate invulnerability isn't having infinite dollars? What if true, unshakable power is waking up one morning and realizing just how breathtakingly little of their stuff you actually need to be completely, deliriously happy? What happens to the global machine when millions of us simply look at what they're selling and peacefully say, "No, thank you, I have enough"?